Hello everyone and welcome to the Bruno Galan talk show. If you like this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel to not miss any future episodes. I also want to mention I have a Patreon page in the description down below for those who are interested in further supporting it. Thank you very much.
I have with me today Derek Galanis, who has quite the life story. Hi, Derek. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, man?
Well, actually, a bit of a cold, so it's but it's okay. I'll make you talk more.
That's a deal. I like to talk. You get me started, I'll never shut up.
There you go. And me is sometimes I look back at my previous episodes. I'm like, I see there. I should have let the person talk longer. So now maybe I won't do it as much today. Derek, like in your words, so I mean, okay, so tell us who you are.
Sure. So, I guess, who I am isn't maybe as important as who my family is. My father was the Bernie Madoff of the 1980s. They sent him away for 27 years in 1986. At the time, it was the longest sentence for a white collar criminal ever. And back then, remember, we're talking the 80s. If you were any kind of criminal, and especially a criminal as successful as my father, you were dealing with the Italian mafia. I mean, we were living back there. So my life became entangled in that mess. I grew up around prisons because I was 14 when my dad went away. I met a lot of, mobsters and other criminals. And of course, I joined those ranks. And finally, after my second time in prison, I realized, wait a minute, people are using me. I'm the patsy here. Well, you know what they say, like, you can't figure out who the sucker is at a poker game. 10 minutes in, you're the sucker. And I started realizing, wait a minute, I'm the sucker here. So, I did what I could do. I wrote two books, one on my life of crime, and I wrote a book on my life in martial arts and combat sports, because that was my passion. Bruno, when you're a criminal, you have a lot of free time on your hands, right? I mean, you work hard maybe in some aspects, but you got to find things to do. So I quite literally trained like a pro fighter all the time. So yeah, it was an interesting life to say the least.
I mean, as far as synergy goes, if and excuse me if as I move some stuff around right now, so I move less after. Again, a bit of a cold, so I'm gonna move my tea closer, so I'm not fidget like turning every time. I guess as far as synergy goes, learning how to fight a life of crime. I mean, yeah, it could be less practical combinations, I think. Um,
You said that it's funny you say that because my father sort of designated me as family muscle. That was his use of me, and the thing was is he couldn't see me in any other respect. So whenever I tried to sort of garner my own respect, I wasn't given any. I mean, the only deal I ever had control of, I moved to Kosovo for 2.5 years. I was running an insurance scam over there. And it was actually really successful. And one thing happened that's very strange. I don't talk about it much. I talk about it in my book, Greed and Fear. But my father started undermining me at every point, and I was very confused. Because I was young. I'm thinking, why is my dad doing this? Well, I didn't really understand the game. My dad was trying to eliminate any perceived or real power I might have to other partners over there to make sure the money went to him. And that was a real wake up call for me because I idolized my father. He was my life. He was quite literally my God, right? Until I got a little older and figured things out. So to have that happen was very confusing to me. But look, lots of life is that way, Bruno. I mean, you know it. I mean, some of those MMA guys I used to fight with and beat up in the gym, they say I'm terrible. I mean, it just makes me smile, man.
Yeah, I think that's there's a saying like there comes a time where every man must kill their father, and of course it's not literally, but figuratively, symbolically, or however you wanna, whatever words you wanna use, but um. There comes a time when someone, killing the father is symbolism, but it also means confronting the realities of who your father was, what they have come to mean in your life, because of course, like, one thing is what we want our fathers to be, and the other is who they are as human beings, right? Who they are as a person, and their um and then of course, some adults decide there's no room for them, other adults like decide like if there is to be room, things need to change. And but for sure there's like there's something I think about men who um I think any man, like when it comes to time to confront their fathers, like every single detail already, like just small details can get us in ways that I'm gonna give you a stupid example. When I was much younger, I was always dressing in black, right? And then as a young adult, I wasn't doing that anymore. But every time my dad would talk on the phone or something about me, he was talking like I was still always dressing in black. And that annoyed me because that was like when I was a teenager, like years ago, and I'm like, dude, how long are you gonna see me as a kid who's always dressing in black like that? And that's just a silly thing, right? But there's something about like our relationships with our fathers, like it's so important to a man, right? And that's quite the personal hell, like what you're telling me right now. I feel for you because it's quite a personal hell, like you don't want your dad to undermine you, you want them to be proud of you, right? um but I guess it speaks also to how there's something about the closest ones to us. They know people who knew us for a long time, they have trouble like recalibrating their perception of us. So if you were the muscle, right, oh, that's your role, so therefore, you know
Yeah,
um
you
yeah,
know, Bruno, it's funny. So the one book, two books that were very popular in prison, you can imagine Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power
love
and
that book.
Artist. Yeah, and law number 38 or something is slay the father. And he gives historical anecdotes. And it was Alexander the Great with Philip of Macedon. Philip of Macedon really didn't want Alexander to become what he became. His mother did, right? And his mother pushed, they literally perhaps killed him to push him out of the way. No, obviously it's not as ugly for a lot of us, but
Yeah.
with my father, it almost was. I mean, listen, my father and brother, once I decided to say, "Hey, I want my money," they hatched a plot to murder me. And that comes right to life with, like, who the power and the struggle and really what the Oedipal complex that is, kill your father and love your mother, or whatever it may be. Yeah, man, there's a lot of deep psychology in my book. People bought my book originally thinking they were going to read about stock trades and manipulations. And don't get me wrong, I cover that, but it's really a book about psychology, the stuff you're talking about right now.
Hmm. Man, I didn't know that. I feel for you. And again, like I come in kind of blind. I'm a busy I'm a family man, like and all that. So I'm reading books at a snail's pace, like 48 Laws of Power read before becoming a father. So otherwise I'm pretty sure it would still be there like midway through or something. Um, a really good book, which people have the misconception that you only manipulators read the book, but you also need to read it to not be the manipulated. And that's a very important point I would say to anyone who has snubbed the book so far because of that. But I think that in a combination with Joko Willing's extreme ownership can set you on a clear clear path. I have to read your books though. That's it. I'm not saying that just because you're on my show. Like that's the book. Those are books I have to get at some point. Um, but I want to ask you, I guess, and you told me your family is Greek or of Greek origins, but you were dealing with the Italians, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. How does that interaction go, if I may ask?
Sure. I mean, look, the bottom line is anybody who grew up back east, through the 60s, 70s, 80s, realized that, the Italian organized crime took control of any type of organized crime back there. So I don't care what you were, whether you were Jewish or anything else, you were going to the Italians when your crime got big enough. People talk about Michael Francis a lot. And, Michael seems like an okay guy. I got nothing bad to say about him, but he didn't come up with that gas scam that he did way back then. Some Russian Jewish guy brought it to him, said, "Hey, Michael, I want to do this." And Michael essentially acted as his roof, which is sort of Russian mafia parlance for like his protection in that. And you always need that. My dad's big crime was Boardwalk Marketplace, which was a renovation of Atlantic City to hopefully what it was in the days of Nookie Thompson and the Boardwalk Empire show that we all know and love now. Now, obviously, never took place because my dad was robbing that money the whole time. But in that time, in the 80s, if you wanted to do business in Atlantic City, the Philadelphia mob controlled it. So my dad was essentially, extorted by the Philadelphia mob. Now, I want to make a clear line here. Guys like my father never think they're being extorted. To them, it's business, right? I paid these guys because that's what you do and it's all okay. At the end of the day, he's paying to be glamorous and be extorted. And by the way, that stuck with my father. He did it in prison too. He met the Cherry Hill Gambinos in Terminal Island. I grew up with Tommy and Tony Gambino, the sons of Rosario. And my dad kept giving them money too, and that was hard for me. You can imagine. I'm like, my dad never funded a dime of anything I wanted to do, but to those kids, to the Gambino kids, he was a nonstop, cash outlay. So yeah, it's interesting the psychology that goes into why we do things and what we do. But yeah, my father is a unique person for sure.
Yeah, so he's still alive, the way you're talking about him right now.
Yeah, no, he's still alive. Listen, so my dad got 6 years on the Drova scam. I got 6 years. My brother got 11. But they had another crime, the one that was with Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden's friend, who is convicted but not in jail yet. And
wait, what?
He got out on Trump's second chance out because he's old, right? He's almost 80. So
Okay.
he's out. He's at home in San Diego. Sure, he's wearing an ankle monitor and all that, but yeah, he's free man once again. And Bruno, I got to bring this up. So, I had one crime before this crime. My dad was a Bernie Madoff of the 1980s, and they gave me the same freaking time that they gave him. And it just makes me smile, man. I mean, that's what I told my dad in about, what was it, 2011? I said, look, man, you're not going to rip me off. I'm going to get the same time in prison as you will. But I meant that figuratively. I had no idea it would become literal, and it did.
How long was it again?
So on my second case, not my drug case, second case, I signed for 8 to 10 years, and they gave me 6. God bless the Southern District of New York. They sentence under the guidelines. They're very liberal back there. So for a criminal, if you're going to get busted, do it in New York.
Noted. One thing that's always confused me about prisons, I guess in your case, you perhaps, maybe not, one more informed, but they always say like, oh, if you go to prison, make sure to kick someone's ass, And I'm thinking about, what if you kick the wrong person's ass? You know what I mean? So, and then like, you don't want to be a pushover, but what if the person you end up like headbutting in the face, and what if that was actually someone, and I was always thinking, this is a side thought, but I mean, I have no reason to ever go there, I hope. But it was always something I was thinking about, like, okay, you're supposed to kick someone's ass, but also like you need to know who's who. But on the first day, how the fuck do you know who's who, right? Are there any like how do you handle that?
Bruno, so that's a wives' tale, right? You go in there first day and you headbutt somebody. I'll tell you what, my first day in my second prison term in Texas, I remember the shot caller got really upset with me and he started screaming at me. But I took it. And the reason I took it was because I knew it's my first day. I got to get the lay of the land. And then they started talking about it, like, because I didn't have to say anything. The guards will tell you, new prisoners will come in and knew my father, and the word gets back, like, do you know who this guy is? He was a pro fighter. He's a Gambino associate. And then you make your move. Then I went to the shot caller's friend. I told him, you tell him I'm going to mess him up. And believe me, he was scared by then. You don't want to fight anything blind, man. You gotta let the scene set itself.
Yeah, I guess in a weird way, being in prison like makes your fighting skills more relevant, because out there in the world, like someone can do something to your car, something can sneak up in an alley, and of course in prison people can outnumber you, or they can still catch you by surprise, but less so, I would think. What I mean by that is that if you're in your cell and someone comes in and they're not supposed to, like, come on, like you don't want to start asking questions, I don't think. so I guess your fighting skills become a bit more of an equalizer in that environment, right?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, even weapons are very makeshift in there. So,
Mm.
having that type of skill really makes a
Grappling,
difference.
grappling. Yeah.
Bruno, the main thing, and I will say this, is your level of respect. I always carried myself with respect to everybody. I don't pick on people, right? But one thing you're not going to do is bully me either, right? So,
Exactly.
so it's that line, and people realize, okay, this guy's a man of respect. He's smart. He's a good guy. But we're not going to try to make a move because that would be bad for our health. And and because of that, most of my prison time went pretty smoothly. Yeah, it was great. And not to mention, like I mentioned about the guards, my jacket says Gambino Associate Black Belt Boxer, Advanced Competitive Skill. And so the guards see that, and then they start whispering in their favorite inmates' ears. And before you know it, the whole compound knows. And you don't really have to do much work yourself. You just, live off your rep.
Yeah, yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? Um, yeah. So I wanted to ask you, when I mean, when you're committing crimes and all that, this is a weird question, but it's always like I've always wondered. People who are part of organized crime, like pop culture in general, like John Wick, Batman, Spider-Man, like they're always about beating up the criminals and like organized crime and like making them look bad or really like demonizing them and all that. And I say this like very neutrally. I just mean this is how it's portrayed. I mean, I'm a big fan of Batman, so but and I love the John Wick movies. But so my point, I guess, is how do you is that something that affects someone who's in organized crime when you see kind of like the pop culture glorifying like the death of what would be your friends in real life, or Batman beating up your someone who could have been like one of your associates, like and then maybe like the kids in the family. I don't know how much they know or not or don't, but I guess if they love, oh, I want a toy of Spider-Man, want a toy of Batman, like how is that like a conflicting feeling, or do you just brush it off like, it's movies, or whatever?
No, I think, Bruno, you got to remember. So everybody kind of looks through rose-colored glasses at themselves, right? So they don't think of themselves in those contexts. And I want to bring up another point, like contingent to what you're saying on at the same time. Like the more the movies glorify the life of crime too, and I'm not just talking about Goodfellas and that type of stuff. How about the Wolf of Wall Street? So I lived a
Mm,
life very much in between the two, right?
yeah.
And so you look towards that rather than you look at the Joker was actually just a wise guy that Batman beat up. So, it's funny with our perspective shapes our life. And you look at the way you look at it, the way people like it. I mean, I used to be proud to say, I'm going to Gambino associate, not realizing that normal society looked at me askew. To me, that was who I was. That was my fame. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting. Everything's perspective.
Yeah, I think there's something where each side will look like the side of normal people, and then the side of, I think, people who are part of that world. I think they both look at each other like, "Oh, you fool!" Like they each kind of like, like each will look like, "Why would you live like that?" And they're both saying the same. They both would look at the other and, "Why would you live like that?" And I guess you could move that to current politics, where like people are on each side and like looking at the other side, like, "What would you?" You know, and then yeah. So I guess there's part of that, and then when you get out of that environment, do you kind of look at it as a, to kind of use the politics analogy, do you kind of look at it as a centrist, or do you now like look at it like you are now part of like the, I don't know what the term would be for people who are not part of that world, but like
A civilian.
a
Yeah,
civilian. There, thank you.
I
I
know.
wasn't sure what.
So
I don't
so
want to use the words that I heard in movies because it might be completely like bullshit. So.
so let me say this, man. I've always been very tough, and I've always been very loyal, and those things don't change about me. Right now, what does change is who I put that loyalty with. Right, because
Mm,
I recognize when people are loyal to me or not. But as you talked about comparing it to politics, and I compare it to MMA world too, man. I mean, people are just, they're very worldly, and it's, they will often side with whoever they think is in their best interest. A lot of friends I thought I had in the criminal world is just like the friends I thought I had in the MMA world. And, I turn around and they say these things about me, and I'm actually stunned, I was there. So you can't tell me what actually happened. I was there. Thank you. You don't have to, put your opinions on me. But I think that's how we are as humans. Our ego is both big and fragile at the same time. And, people betray. That's what they do. It's part of this worldly existence. So, yeah, man, no matter what we're talking about, politics, whether we're talking about crime or we're talking about MMA, it's all the same.
Yeah. What's really funny is that like when you talk about the MMA gym and all that, like me, I have like interests, hobbies that are like really like on the geek side, like complete nerd stuff, like, and then I don't have the time for it now, but I'll go back to the gym at some point before I get too old to continue properly, before I end up like being tired too fast. But um it's like these were two completely different worlds. It was really funny because like the geek side is like very leftist and very much like more sensitive and careful what you say, how you say it to people. I mean, in the MMA side, of course, careful what you say as well, but not in the same way. Although, yeah, also very sensitive. Now that I think about it, what the fuck am I saying? But okay, let's call it political correctness on one side, and the other side is you hear stuff and very right wing and then like it's kind of funny how I find myself with these two like hobbies that are like do not go together, and like my social circles are like I can never mix them up. It would be funny in a party. It would be really funny to mix them up, but I don't know what it would look like, right? Um, but yeah, it's for sure. I think my motivation for going to an MMA gym was just like pragmatic self defense. So I didn't go with this intention of feeling like I was establishing some dominance over others or with a chip on my shoulder. It was very pragmatic. Like what happened was over the years, I ended up like when something was happening, I would help people because I didn't just look away, and then I realized I should probably learn how to fight if I'm going to continue doing this shit. Um, is one time when I was kind of like holding someone down, I was thinking, I hope he doesn't have a knife because I have no clue what to do on the floor right now, on the ground with this person. And that made me go train. But it's you talk about like people and there are a lot of insecure people in martial arts. They're like like I think people are glorify it in a way that I mean I love martial arts, I love MMA, but we also have to remember like getting a black belt in something doesn't make you an enlightened individual. It just makes you a very skilled individual, very motivated, very strong-willed to go at least in that aspect of life, because there's many ways to be strong-willed and all that. But for sure, like there's some idiot motherfuckers out there, and they think that their status gives them wisdom and everything. No, it fucking doesn't. And if anything, they become even more insecure because this weird thing happens when you train where you're more dangerous than you've ever been, but you also realize how vulnerable you are a lot more than you thought you were back when you didn't train. It's a weird dichotomy, right? It's very and so I've met some real insecure black belts, like BJJ black belts, and or like, and when they realize maybe that I did some sambo at some point, maybe they realize you're not that easy to take down, and that like the way they own you on the floor might not come so easily if it came to it, and knowing that and maybe they knew I did some striking, like they knew I could throw some elbows at them or something in a certain position, so they start treating you weird, and there's something about mixed martial arts, and where I think people need to understand what training for fighting is, and in a way, I was very careful to not make friends. Do you know what I mean? Like I think I went there to gain a skill. I don't have to be their friends. They're not my family. They're not. And okay, for professional fighters, I understand it's very different. But like for someone like me who goes there to train, like I think people need to understand when you go to the gym, like a lot of people go there with the intention of becoming enlightened in some way. Go see a therapist. Go study like theology or whatever. I don't know. Like go philosophy. Like I think you're telling me about this, and it just comes to show like there's a lot of very petty motherfuckers out there in gyms. I took a long way to say it, but
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, so as you said, martial arts, fighting in general, is a skill. It's repetition. You learn by rote, right? You do it over and over and over again. And you're right, somehow people get confused. And by the way, there's another bifurcation we didn't touch on. So I've been a martial artist since, I started wrestling in first grade. I started Kung Fu when I was 11, and I never stopped like training in one discipline or another. So martial arts, the idea is to tame the ego, right? To get control of that ego. And a very beautiful thing can happen, right?
yeah,
You can get so confident and dangerous that you actually never have to fight because your skill will avoid that fight before it happens.
like you in
Both
prison, like when you went to prison.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly like that.
yeah,
Because you also know the danger that can happen. Because, by the way, like Bruno, let's be honest, I'm a very skilled fighter. A guy who doesn't know anything might knock me out. If he's 275 pounds, he's really big, and he takes a swing, and I don't catch it right away. So you always have to be aware of that, and those people know that.
yeah.
Unfortunately, combat sports is all about developing the ego. And that's what Conor McGregor is a manifestation of. I mean, I know that's his show personality. Don't get me wrong, because that's what sells tickets. But at the same time, don't you also become that character, right? Because you can't
Right.
turn it off and on. You can't like switch it on, switch it off. No, you have to become that character. Colby Covington actually was not that same guy he became. He became that guy to sell tickets. He's actually a normal guy like everybody else. And one fan said, well, why don't you show people this side? He goes, listen, man, that doesn't sell. So it's a really weird dichotomy with MMA. When I went to the gym, I got out of prison the first time in my mid to late 30s. Now, that with that caveat, I was in the shape of my life. I could run 10 miles in the morning, lift weights, and then go spar. I was really in sick shape. So I was more than a match for most of the UFC pros at that time, especially if they were grapplers. I was a pro kickboxer when I was younger. And to me, the way they shined me off or put me in some place, and then to hear about the way they actually thought about me later, Bruno, I was shocked, man. But that's the fragility of big egos like that. And I would tell you that guys that are on the top have to have that type of ego. The majority of them do, right? Because they
Yeah.
can't lose in their own mind. They won't allow themselves to lose. They won't tap, and they've got to annihilate the other guy. And I get it. They're fighting for millions of dollars. So, but yeah, I was very disappointed with those guys, just like the organized crime guys.
Yeah, yeah. I think most most human beings are just insecure. And like now I talk shit about the MMA gym. Look, in geeks, like the thing is, you go in. How can I put this? If you go into that world with a certain amount of social skill, right? I mean, and now it's getting different because now they're kind of becoming moral panic witch hunters within the hobby of geekdom. And everything has to be politically correct, and everything has, and if someone says something that's even slightly off, like the written instructions, like they turn on that person, But I know a writer of tabletop role playing games who's been hounded for years. People like lie about him and all that just because he like basically he said that people should be able to write about any dark subject matter they want. So like, stuff like you'd see in a Tarantino movie, which is super mainstream. So just to give you an idea, there's a lot of different type of ego and fragility and desire for control, and in that case, I would argue as well. It's a different type of insecurity, which manifests more in the insecure through that insecurity. They want to control in other ways, and they want to feel powerful in other ways without wanting to admit that that's what they want to do, right? So I think at the end of the day, no matter. I'm going back to that because I want to clarify, because at first I can mention I had two hobbies, and I didn't want to like make it seem like, oh, the other one was all squeaky clean. No, it fucking isn't. And then like guys who are not popular with girls will become bitter towards women, like stuff like that. So I think It's just humans. Most humans are shit at managing their emotions or their thoughts, or controlling themselves, or knowing themselves, or knowing other people, or being honest with themselves. Self-assessment is not a skill that most people have. No, and then it leads, of course, to, like, I guess what happened with your father, the way he treated you, and things like that. Because I think if you have a son who's skilled, that's a blessing. That's not competition. If you have developed a proper relationship, I would like to think, with your son, that becomes a blessing for you. It doesn't become an issue. Um, which, again, it feels kind of weird that I'm talking like like you did a good job at doing something criminal, but still to keep it within the context of the family business, if you will, that you have. Um, yeah, it's just I see sometimes when you go live, I see some people like to talk shit, and I'm like, there's no way in hell that any of those who who talk shit have any sort of actual self-awareness, proper skill. That's something that matters, or at least that would define them in a way that they're proud of themselves. But I'm sure they would tell themselves that they do, but they don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I've had shows done on me about how I'm a fraud, and it just makes me smile. I say, and by the way, I got it from the crime side first, right? Ah, he's not a Gambino. So I just happen to have my prison documents where the BOP documents me that way, and I put them out there. I haven't heard much since. But, the MMA guys are the same. They said, yeah, well, we avoided you, but we didn't avoid you because you were good. We avoided you because you sucked. Just smiled to myself. Oh my goodness, you kidding me? You mean you put me with the heavyweights? It's because I sucked? Come on, man. That's just ridiculous. But listen, anything to save the ego, like you said. And I think, Bruno, forget, just geekdom or MMA. Go to crime. It's the same thing with the bosses. It's what it was with my father. It's ego, and is my son going to get ahead of me? It's really weird how we are as humans. Really sad, actually.
Yes, but Derek, I have to like pussyfoot around the subject matter because I don't want to talk shit about criminals.
They're the
My name
worst.
is on the show, man.
They're the most petty. What are you kidding me?
um, no, but seriously, I do have a question though. I mean, I guess, I guess it's for stuff that people already know. I guess that's the answer. But you mentioned Francis and yourself, and sometimes I'm like, wow, they really say a lot. They go like, you guys really go into detail. I'm like, I guess that's allowed because they're still like telling the stories, But um, is there a rule for that? Like, because when people get out of life, like, how does that work?
So let's talk about that. It's funny, like when that guy was doing. I'm not even going to mention his name because I won't give him any press. Yeah, what Vince McMahon used to do to the old WCW. Don't talk about it. But he said, that these guys like Galanis, they must be real sociopaths because they can make up stories and they sound really, really true. And the funny part to me is, man, the stories aren't untrue. They're absolutely 100% true. That's why they sound true. But listen, all of those guys, John Light, Michael Francis, me, we're all out of that life, which means we don't answer to that life at all. The difference between me and those guys is I wasn't a rat. I never told on anyone else. And the only way I can explain that, Bruno, is I have a conscience. I can't take the pain that's coming towards me and put it on somebody else and live with myself. Those guys, they didn't have that same conscience. That's okay. Everybody's different. I get that. And as far as Michael goes, the funny thing for me with Michael is he's out in LA now. And he's out in LA right by my friend Tommy Gambino, the kid I grew up with, whose father was in Terminal Island. And lo and behold, they're both in the wine business all of a sudden. So, Michael, was the original, what I term in my book, underground financier, which is, a financial mobster, right? He's a mobster, but he uses finance as his mechanism. There's a lot more money for a lot less time in prison. And that's what they're doing with those wineries. And it just makes me smile. Those guys, the top of the world, good for them. They got away with it. The rest of us, what can you say?
But I guess what I'm and that's all like fascinating. But what I was wondering is, doesn't it happen that someone goes like, "Hey, Derek, listen to me. Don't don't tell these stories anymore." Does that ever happen? Like,
Happens, Bruno, happens all the time.
okay,
I've been threatened numerous times over TikTok. And I tell them the same thing. I make videos of it. I go, hey guys, here's the bottom line. I never told on any of you. You never got in trouble because of me.
okay,
But these are my experiences. And one thing you guys do not own is my experiences.
mm,
And I finish with, if you got a problem with it, make a move. And that's really the way I feel about it. You know,
okay,
they want to make a move, do it. And the thing is, though, Bruno, and being fair to all of it, we're not in the 1980s anymore. These guys have figured out a lot of tricks. You know, the Cherry Hill Gambinos that run the Gambino crime family now. Last two Gambino busts were racketeering based on fraud. Nothing to do with murder, nothing to do with, I mean, drugs will always be around, but they'll be
yeah,
around in every strata of society. There's always going to be some guys that have no utility beyond selling drugs or selling women on a corner. And those guys can go ahead and keep doing that, right? But the upper levels of the mafia, if you want to know what they're doing today, read my book because that is exactly what they're doing. And don't trust me. Look at the last few Gambino cases. It's all like that. So yeah, the day has changed. And think of this, Bruno. If they decide, you know, I'm really angry at that Derek guy, I want to murder him. The feds would love them to murder me. Why? Because they can make a murder charge now stick against them. They'd
mm,
be thrilled. They'd be falling into that trap. Now, am I playing with fire like that? Yeah, to a certain extent. But Bruno, I'm telling you, man, I'm not going to be silenced. I was a loyal soldier for years in that life. I'm done with that, man. Now you guys left me with nothing. I'm 50 years old. Guess what? All I have is my experiences, and I'm going to talk about it. And yeah, I've been threatened continuously, and it doesn't make me change.
mm. I guess it makes sense, right? Because if you're not gonna say anything that will get anyone in trouble, why poke the bear? Like, why take the risk of escalating? Or it makes sense, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's very weird, you know. Like you tell me these stories, and I'm like, it's so different from any conversation I've ever had before, to be honest with you. No, it really is. And so it's almost like, you know, like I'm trying to think, and I'm just being transparent here, and I think this is, you know, I just keep coming up with freaking pop culture. I just movies and TV shows, and it's like I'm trying to not do that, right? I'm trying to have a conversation with you, the person talking to me, and I don't want to start going like, oh, is it like in this movie? Which I think it's a silly point of reference, but at the same time, isn't it the only one that we civilians have, right? Uh, unless we go poke the bear in a different way. Um, one time I went into a biker bar. I was drunk and I didn't know it was a biker bar, and just because there was a pinball machine, and the guys didn't look like tough bikers I'd seen from in movies. They just looked like, yeah, I don't know, like, you know, guys wearing jeans and stuff, and maybe they don't shave, but they don't look like what I've seen in movies. And then they thought I was an undercover cop, and and yeah, and that was my only time when I had to like kind of deal with that experience. And but I think I had a good instinct where I got annoyed at one of them, which sounds like a no, but in actuality made him not see me as a victim, I guess you could say, you know,
Yep,
like,
yep,
and I stayed for another beer to kind of establish I wasn't in a hurry to leave. I didn't have anything to hide. So I think
yep.
I think I had good, even in my drunkenness. I think I had like some good thinking there before I left. And then some like chicks came in, they were all over them. That's when, okay, guys, bye. And they didn't care about me anymore because the chicks were there. So, and that was my only like point of reference of any real interaction, if you will. But you know, since I've rambled about that, is that annoying to you? Like, do people like talk? Like, do you get weirdos who are like really fascinated by that aspect, but to a point where you're like, okay, this is getting weird. Like, do you like they really want you to tell them details, or it gets really weird, or they interact with you in a way where they're always reminding you of that, like I don't know, like oh whoops, I don't know, like I dropped this, please don't whack me, ha ha ha, you know, or this stuff like that. Do you have to deal with that kind of people where I guess what pro fighters will be like, don't knock him out, don't choke me, haha, and it, like that freaking like haha, I'm joking about being a beta male, but I'm kind of being one right now, or I don't know, like
Yeah, well, yeah, the
I'm
answer is
tired.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, no. So listen, I
Yeah,
I get I get people on the internet that will ask me
online.
questions about specific things. In person, what it usually is, 9 times out of 10, is an unspoken rule. Like everybody goes, "Oh, I don't want to mess with you, Derek," and everybody goes, but nobody talks about it in my face. Like they don't say, "Oh, Gambino, this or that." So mostly, it reminds me of prison, right? Like that jacket that I have is just tacitly controlling the entire environment. And that's fine with me. I always try to put in my best respectful air. And that's it. I mean, there's some things I don't talk about. And I don't like talking about. But most people don't push it that far, to be totally honest with you. But listen, I will tell you this. People say, well, you were part of the new mob, not the old mob, this and that. I guarantee you I've had more physical confrontations than 90% of those old mobsters have, just because of the way we grew up, angry, fathers in prison and whatnot. My older brother is a classic sociopath, used to beat me, and then in turn, we used to beat people on the street. But yeah, that's just, it's one of those things. That's part of my past, man. And I don't shy away from talking about it if someone wants to, but I'll be real honest with you, most people are too embarrassed to bring it up.
Okay, so I guess the aura itself takes care of that situation, like not having to deal with stupid conversations or annoying like questions or people being kind of like morbidly curious or something like that.
But you know
Um,
what's more annoying, Bruno? I gotta get
tell
this
me,
out there.
tell me.
What's more annoying is people, they get to know you and they realize you're human, and then they think there's no way that you're this character in their mind that you've been, and then they actually can be disrespectful or obnoxious or whatever, and that can be annoying. It's more annoying than the people wanting to probe to hear. But look, man, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think there's some of that where people just don't realize who they're messing with. Like they don't their points of reference for knowing when someone is dangerous or not are no good at all. Um, from personal experience, like one moment I knew that there were two buff men who were harassing a group of women, and I got involved. And that was back when I was like, I'm not in good shape right now, but back then I was in really bad shape. I had like a pot belly, like skinny arms. I mean, I'm not muscular now, but that was like the worst shape I'd ever been in my life. I still knew how to fight a little bit back then. Before I'd really learned MMA, but I had done some stuff here and there, like only striking. But I would say that if fighting is a language, I knew a few words at least, but most people don't know shit. So and what happened was like the guys had taken off their shirts to show their muscles, and so to the average person, those are dangerous men, right? They have muscles,
Yep.
they're dangerous. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
That's where it stops. And then I go, hey, and I show up and I'm like, I'm a bit drunk, but I don't like what they're doing. Telling the women that their moms failed because they're ugly, like stuff like that. But nah, it's not okay. And I just show up like all smiling. Hey, what's going on, guys? What's happening? Why are you not wearing shirts? Like, and right away, like if someone approaches jokingly in a high tense situation, that really should tell you something. They didn't pick up on it, and they then the guy kind of like, oh, go back to your house and your teddy bears. Okay, how do you know I have plushies at home? and and then a guy like kind of like pushed me like this, and I'm looking at him staying there, and this is where I knew the guy was not. I mean, they're dangerous because they're still buff, right? They can still cause damage, but I mean, that's when I knew they didn't have familiarity with altercation, confrontation, or physical violence. Is because they should have understood at that point. People who push each other to pump themselves up to that moment don't are not comfortable with violence. They
Mhm.
want to pretend that they are, but
Mhm.
so the thing is that if I was an easy victim, when he pushed me, I would have left. Or if I was like him trying to tell myself like, oh, I'm comfortable with this, but I'm not really, I'm just gonna push him back. But if I just stay there calmly, like you just did that, and I'm still there, I'm not in like the guy. So the guy, like in his mind, thought that I must have been too scared to push him back. I think that was his thought process, right? But someone who knows a bit more understands, well, okay, he's staying there calmly. He doesn't mind being in that environment, like there's a difference. And and well, what happened after. But it's just interesting because they thought they knew what confrontation was. They thought they were tough because they went to lift some weights, but they were not tough. Well, I guess to kind of finish the context, what happened after was one of them tried to sneak behind me, and I went like, "Hey, one at a time, don't cheat." And he was baffled by my reaction. And see, again, like someone actually used to violence wouldn't have been controlled so easily by me being like, don't cheat, one at a time. Like they would have just continued forward, rushed me two at a time, right? Use their size to their advantage. The fact that he was baffled and let me do that, like he had no familiarity with confrontation. He even said, like, my friend is thinking about attacking you. And I was like, okay, well, tell you what, if your friend wants to attack me, he can attack me and I'll defend myself. How about that? And he was confused by my answer, like I was just amused. And it was kind of funny because at this point I had taken their attention away from the girls and I was kind of ready to walk away, um, but then again, my recollection of the events is a bit like out of order a little bit because I was drunk. But one of them tried to punch me and I blocked. Although because I was drunk and sloppy, I actually hurt my little finger blocking because it was loose. I didn't swat properly. I was like, I sweat like this, and I tried to kick him in the balls, but I was drunk and I was wearing tight jeans. Not I don't mean like skinny jeans, but like they were not flexible. And instead kicked him inside the leg, which was already enough to make him go away. So someone was like screaming like, they're starting a fight. And then he's running away. The same guy screamed in confusion. Then what was ugly is that to kind of compensate for that, he decided to go kick one of the girls.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and the girl tried to spray him, and that, the pepper spray doesn't like it. It's harder to aim than people think. And like when someone's moving at you, like you think like, um, um, and I think it works if someone's standing still, they don't see it coming. But if someone's already moving on you, like but maybe the police has, I don't know. But the one she had didn't do jack shit, and he kicked her. And that's when I started running after him. And even then, his buddy was running parallel to me, but not tackling me. And I was keeping an eye on him. And I was still worried because there were two big men, like I'm still out of shape and outnumbered. And then this Latino guy starts running next to me. He's like, I saw what happened. I'm with you. Okay, cool. Yeah. And then eventually, like the guy running away, and I was screaming, you just heard a woman, because I knew that we were moving away from the initial context. Now I looked like a crazy guy running after a poor guy who's like, so I'm giving context to every single new intersection why I'm running after this guy. So I'm not seen as the bad guy that other people try to stop or something. And then the guy ran through a red light, and a sports car just hit him in the legs. He flew up in the air.
And then, his ass.
Yeah, dude, I was like, and then what happened is on adrenaline, the guy's still flying in the air. I'm already thinking, like, okay, that guy got his ass kicked now. I don't need to do anything else. I just need to get the fuck out of here. And then, I mean, again, I didn't do that to him, but then I turn around, there a group of girls was following, they were cheering. So imagine the guy in the sports car. Some idiot runs in front of your car, flies in the air, and you look on the corner, and a group of girls cheering. What just happened? And then when I finally looked back, they were gone, and the hospital was right there. So either they kept running on adrenaline, or he took his friend to a hospital. I don't know. But that was again, I did not push him into the traffic. He chose to run there. I was just running after him to have a serious conversation with him, and he ran into the traffic. But I was gonna have a serious conversation with him. But but so anyway, that story took way too long. I apologize here. But it's just
there's a couple things that I want to say about that story, and they're all disjointed. The pushing thing, that's why every underage high school fight starts with pushing. You analyze it perfectly, right? Because you're young, you're not comfortable with violence yet. And the toughest kid in school when you're 9th, 10th, 11th grade was the one who's accustomed to violence already, right? Because maybe his dad hits him or his brother hits him and he comes out swinging. Because the rest of the kids just want to push. And that's a funny that you bring that up. There's the other thing I want to bring up, the musclehead thing. That was very big in the 80s. But I think what's happened because of the popularity of MMA, a lot of those people who would have been simply muscleheads doing that become quote unquote MMA fighters. And these are some of the jackasses that we've talked about in the gym that you see. And the last thing I want to talk about. So my last fight I was in prison. And what happened, I went to a place in California, and my brother and father had done a number telling everyone I was a rat. By the way, totally untrue. They were trying to deflect attention from themselves. So I get to this prison, and the white shot caller and the Sereno shot caller talking about it. Long story short, I have to fight the white shot caller. Now, when I did it, I hit him with a right hand, but then as I came in with my left hook, I hit him on my own thumb. Now, where does this come from? It's because you get in the bad habit when you're wearing big boxing gloves for sparring, where the technique doesn't have to be perfect and your hand is protected. Just like when you parried that guy's punch, your finger got hurt because you don't need, when you're using gloves and whatnot, you're protected automatically. And it was a kind of a wake-up call for me. Now I throw my left hook properly rather than with the inside of my palm like that. And by the way, that thumb's never been the same. I did win that fight though.
Oh, you went, okay, so you I'm just curious now. So you would do this thing, that this kind of hook, kind of like this?
So
like they go like this instead of like this. You went like this.
And then when my hook came, it would land right there. But I could get away with it in boxing gloves, right?
Yeah.
You would never know the difference one way or the other. The guy's still affected. It's still a powerful blow. The problem is without gloves on, that's a really weak part of your hand. I almost broke my thumb. It's still to this day.
I guess you could do I mean, I know that you just do what you drilled so often when these things happen, but I guess if you were to translate it to no gloves, you could do the bass root and like open hand.
Would have been better for me that day for sure.
it's always but I mean, at least you got it hurt like defending your life. It wasn't some silly stupid like I have a foot that still hurts just from improperly stopping a takedown in BJJ, you know, like, so it's like, at least your story is like, my thumb hurts, but I survived.
So. I mean, look, God willing, that's my last street fight in my life, right? I mean, I'm not 100% on that, but we'll hope.
When I started training, I quickly calmed down, and now I have a family and all that, and I'm like, it would take a lot for me to get involved now, you know, like I have other priorities, and you know, I'll help other people within reason, but my priority is to get home to my family at the end of the day, and that's what it is, you know. I made no qualms about it, because you never know. Like one time, it was when I was in Montreal, and this guy punched me, and it's not that he punched me that hard. It's just I had like fancy shoes to go out, and they slipped on the ice, and I hit the back of my head, and you know, like that. And I was so drunk that I didn't. No, wait, was that before I started? Yeah, no, that okay. I didn't do a break fall because also that was before I started training. Sorry, but at least grappling, you know. And that could have been it for me. Like I hit the back of my head, but you know, the ice a bit more slippery, the feet a bit higher. That could have been it. Instead, the guy advanced and I kicked his leg, and then his friends separated us when they saw that I wasn't out of it. They were gonna let him jump on me, and then when I kicked his leg from the floor, the ground, they're like, okay, that's enough, guys. Motherfuckers. So so these things happen fast. Although, funny story though, I chipped my teeth and I went to see the dentist, all worried about the chipped, and she was like, no, it's fine, it didn't go far. However, you're gonna lose your teeth if we don't fix your gums. So thank you, guy who chipped my teeth that time. I would have lost my teeth if he hadn't punched me.
I like that. I like that story. Say sometimes we find out things we had no idea from a bad thing.
It's the dumbest way ever to go to the dentist and find out you have an issue.
Bruno, I want to talk about something else because it's another dynamic.
Yeah.
One of the things we've talked about is a lot of MMA guys, and I'm in total agreement with you. Don't get me wrong, but what we've kind of ignored is there's a whole culture of Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys now too. And it's very interesting to me. It's not that I don't love jiu-jitsu. It's the only martial art I train like with a team in a school. I'm not very good at it, and I've been doing it for a year or so. I don't know how to explain that. I'm just more of a striker. It takes naturally to me. But, look, they don't really even punch in Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
No.
Yet a lot of jiu-jitsu guys feel like, well, I'm deadly in a fight. And they actually don't even punch. And, for me, that's a little bit like the school kid thing with the pushing. It's like, well, you're only, part of the way there. You're not all the way there. And look, I'm not belittling jiu-jitsu in any sense. I do think there's a lot of people in there like the MMA guys. And it can become a really weird culture too.
Well, the thing with BJJ, what's kind of funny is that it started as the revelatory martial art in the 90s, where it exposed a lot of stuff. But then it has in its own way in many places, and I don't mean like places like TriStar in Montreal, for example, like they practice the wrestling with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which are already like good. You know how to fight on the ground. How about taking the person to the ground in the first place? And of course, it's an MMA place. So if you want to learn the other stuff and you want to learn the grappling, that will go along with the striking. And I've always said like something that idiots and smart people say about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they're both right in different ways. And no, sorry, the idiot is wrong, but the smart guy is right. The trained guy is right. I could just punch you there. The idiot says it, not understanding shit, and he thinks he can punch at any moment, and it's not going to work in many positions. But then what happens, people only do grappling. They do stuff that would get them smashed by someone who knows grappling and knows how to hit in the midst of grappling, So I know that I was really enjoying before I moved and before my life became a lot busier. The one I was practicing at the end was combat sambo, and I was really happy with combat sambo. I was having a lot of fun with that one. And emphasize a lot of top position, stuff like that. And I was still at the BJJ gym. At some point they intersected during a while because you have your subscription, and there's a higher belt who took forever to take me down because of the skills. I'm not skilled at sambo, but just the mere fact of doing it, I was getting a lot better at defending takedowns than a lot of people who don't defend takedowns very often. With the jacket, so I could see the higher belt, saw something in his eyes at some point where he was feeling like this. Why the F am I not taking this blue belt down? Why the hell is this blue belt not going down? And eventually he eventually, he's higher belt, I hope so, but he eventually got there. But in my head, I knew that it would have turned into an MMA, once you add in the striking, maybe I wouldn't have gone to the ground at all if that was the BJJ school. We're doing BJJ, but so I think what happens is with BJJ is it used to be the revelatory martial art, but now some schools, not all of them, are doing what all martial arts used to do. The martial arts that BJJ used to expose, they're kind of becoming that. They're ignoring everything else around, thinking that just their style will be enough, just karate will be enough, just boxing will be enough, just this will be enough. And again, if you love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the sake of it, have fun. You don't need to justify anything. Just do that if that's for the fun of it. And any purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is going to kick most normal people's asses. Don't get me wrong. That goes without saying, even blue belt. But I think that's where we come to the point where it's kind of like history repeating itself, where some BJJ schools, I think those that have pro fighters, they stay in touch with reality, and other ones are starting to kind of I don't want to say any names, but I think we've recently seen fights where people stuck to pure BJJ against like just the skilled professional MMA fighters, not even the elite, and it just didn't work for them. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead, Bruno.
Oh no, sorry. So again, I'm a bit tired, so I'm taking way too long to explain my to figure out my own thoughts here. But I
No,
think what
you said something brilliant. No, but go ahead. And
so,
I'll.
so to yeah to kind of like try to shorten what I was saying, I think BJJ started as the one that exposed the lacking arts, and now BJJ has split into, and everyone is always gi no gi, but to me it's not even gi no gi. It's not even, that's the less relevant part of it. To me is which BJJ schools have stayed in touch with reality and which ones are becoming like those old martial arts. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've never heard it described that way, but it's very apt. It's a perfect description. Now, one thing I will say, when the UFC came around, and the thing we have to remember is what works really well is when somebody has no idea what you're doing, and I can flow something onto that. Like, if you don't know me and I come into your gym, you may be in the UFC, but guess what? I've got so many tricks I've done that I will throw some. Now I'm talking striking, of course, 'cause I'm really bad at jujitsu, so I don't want to make this confused.
I'm also
But
bad at jiu-jitsu.
yeah, so I will throw strikes that will confuse you and will hit you. And then as you adapt to my style, you'll be able to close that gap. I think that has happened certainly in jiu-jitsu over the course of the UFC. Right now, we see where pure jiu-jitsu just doesn't work anymore. And if you don't believe me, you should have watched Kron Gracie the other night, unable to fight
Yeah.
still. And here's the funny thing about Kron. I was training with the Scrap Pack when Kron showed up, and his striking was absolutely terrible. But listen, he's Hickson's son, right? Hickson Gracie's son. So, Kron Gracie's going to get latitude. But it's amazing to me, all these years later, his striking is still not any better. And, I would say that a lot of those MMA gyms, Scrapback included, they're not really places of learning. There's a lot of ego there, and development gets stunted because of that ego. And Kron's a prime example, man. You would think by now, look, when I was there and Kron showed up, it had to be what, 13, 14. Now what? We're 10 years in the future, and Kron still can't strike. I mean, there's no excuse for that. So yeah, it's interesting, but I've loved to see UFC start of, like, at first, what did people say? Oh, karate doesn't work. But now we see everybody use spin hook kicks, right? So everything has its place, and I just love seeing everything fall into where every art has something special to offer.
Yeah, it's just about putting it together. Like the thing is that what people, for example, taek then you mentioned Tang Sudo, but Taekwondo gets a lot of crap. The thing about Taekwondo is that it does one thing, it does it very well, but it's not a complete art. I don't think I'm going to anger even a black belt in Taekwondo by saying this. Um, so it's an incomplete art if you don't look at it that way, but the same way that boxing is an incomplete art, right? And I'm not to piss off boxers. Although I'm going to mention a funny observation I had a while back though in a moment. But however, those things they do well, they still work well.
Yeah,
So yeah, so you know, um, I would never put any money on an Aikido guy winning a fight. However, some Aikido guys who transition to BJJ, they have
yeah,
really nasty wrist locks.
yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, Bruno, on that note, and I got to bring this up because it's so important, and this is in my martial arts book. So Anderson Silva, right? Everybody thinks of him as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai. And by the way, it's funny because his Jiu-Jitsu is not that good, right? But his Muay Thai seems really great. But is it really even Muay Thai? The truth of the matter is, Anderson Silva had like a 15-year experience in Taekwondo
Yes.
before he went to Muay Thai. And his kicking that is so pinpoint accurate that we've all been so amazed with. Yeah, I know they're Muay Thai kicks, but that accuracy comes from the Taekwondo, from kicking the air. But they would never bill Anderson as a Taekwondo guy. And if you notice something, when he got flagged for performance enhancing drugs when he beat Nick Diaz by decision, he didn't say he was going to go to Thailand. He said, "I'm going to compete in Taekwondo
Yeah,
for Brazil in the Olympics," and
yeah,
that says it all, man.
yeah. No, for sure. Like it's just because I think when things are learned in the void, you don't learn how to apply them outside that void. That's all. Of course, there's things that just don't work like that.
Yeah,
Just
Earl.
to make that clear, I'm not like being like this like diplomat of martial arts, like, oh, everything has it. No, not everything has its place, but a lot has its place. Um,
There's
and
nothing
what, yeah.
to that doesn't work on the street. You know, there's a
Oh,
lot.
dude, like, yeah, no, that's that. Yeah, for example, women self-defense. Would I mean, okay, if it happens a certain, like, if you're already in that position, okay, I understand. Would you, in a self-defense situation where a woman's being assaulted by a man, would you recommend that she pulls guard?
No,
No, no, no. you know, um, I think some takedowns are good for women, like when you grab from behind the back and you trip the back leg, where you kind of like destabilize without using that much brute strength, like stuff like that, especially because they're going to be shorter, so you can go kind of like underneath. I digress. But yeah, so I mean, there's also the context, right? Because a lot of context is lost. Like we've all seen the. I saw a video one time of a school kid who was keeping the bully on the ground using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then another of the friends kicked him in the head, and then he's doing the bacon on the floor. They're all laughing at him. It was disgusting. But again, like like you can't just know one thing and think you're all set. And in an older channel, Bruins MMA show, I had Tony Blauer as a guest, and he's a self-defense guy, like, and that's kind of like, we went over it in detail, but it's kind of like you also have like instant reaction. It's not going to be your fighting, like your fighting stance. He trains people to react from there, like, because that's kind of like if someone like doing something, you're going to be like this. You're not like, okay, ready, go. Like, there's a lot of trained people who freeze up in a real, like, someone's showing in their face, they just freeze because they're so used to being ready. Are you ready? You're ready? Okay, let's go. Um, but yeah, and that doesn't always happen like that. And one joke I wanted to make before I forget it is, what's funny is that if Francis Ngannou had time traveled to UFC 1, everyone would still think that you only need boxing.
it's true. It's true. Listen, look, forget just that. Remember, UFC almost went under. And the only reason the UFC made it, and Bruno, I'm sure you know this. So Dana and the Fertitas go
Yep.
through $40 million, and they're on the last rope. The actors go on strike, and everything's reality TV. And
Yeah.
Dana says, let's do a reality TV show, see how it goes. They put it after the WWF on Spike TV, and they hit it out of the park. But if not for that, people would remember the UFC as, oh, John McCain, human cockfighting. It was never a sport, could never be a sport. And that's what's funny to me, man. The small little things that make all the difference in the world for success or failure. And by the way, that goes to each of us as humans too. The little tiny things that may have happened or did not happen,
Oh,
where we're stuck wherever,
yeah, for sure. You mentioned the wrestling, the entertainment wrestling. Like, how crazy is that? Now it's like the same owners, UFC and WWE, I think it's called now.
So yeah, so let me
Yeah.
let me tell you a funny story, Bruno, and this is in my first book, second too, I think. So
Okay.
I grew up outside of New York,
I promise you,
in,
I'll get them. I get the
in
books.
Greenwich, Connecticut,
Yeah.
and you know who was our neighbor for a year and a half? Vince McMahon with his
No
son
way.
Shane. I used to play with him on the block.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that guy's a character. Now he looks like a bad guy from a Latino soap opera. Like, dyed his hair black, the mustache. Vincente.
They call that there's a term for that in their industry. It's called living your gimmick. What he's doing is literally like living his character now.
Yeah, yeah. When I heard the news, I was not thrilled because you know how the fights in Japan, like some of them were fixed, and you know, like maybe I'm being paranoid, but I feel a danger in the cross pollination.
No, look, remember one thing, Bruno. In this country, the athletic commissions are all over that stuff.
Yeah,
So,
it's
I
true.
mean, the bigger thing right now has been the gambling with the James Krause thing and all that. But I don't think you'll ever see any cross pollination where they start doing that. I mean, Dana knows. That's why Dana went after performance enhancing drugs so hard. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but in the '90s, they went after Vince McMahon. They said he was running a continuing criminal enterprise with drugs, selling, making his fighters be on steroids. And there was like this time in the WWF, like you saw all the wrestlers went off steroids, all their bodies changed like overnight. It
No
was
way.
really
I
funny,
didn't
man.
know that. That. Oh my God, that's funny.
He got through that. But Dana, when they started swimming around him, Dana had that to reference. And the funny part is, as you know, I'm sure Dana's juiced out of his mind on steroids.
Dude, did you? Is it me or did he lose muscle mass after he's? I'm just gonna go for it. After he slapped his wife, I think he lost some muscle mass, and I'm like, maybe he got off the juice to be less like
He got off
aggressive.
the testosterone. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because I think that maybe that's what happened. Maybe I don't like the guy, but like I think even he would, if you do that to your wife, and I think he reassessed things a little bit, and because he was getting like really jacked, and
Yeah.
now he seems to have lost some weight, and I think, and no one's talking about it because MMA press is always sucking his dick, but I think that's my theory that maybe after the event where he slapped his wife, he was like, okay, I need to get off these things that are making me like really aggressive. Um, I think he lost muscle, right? Is it just me?
No, you're right. And
Yeah.
by the way, it's not the first time I've sort of heard that idea mentioned, and I think you guys are onto it, Bruno. I think that's 100% true. You realize, and he's a drinker too, right? So he's
Uh,
juiced out of. Looks like a bodybuilder. He's drinking all the time. You get real. I mean, look, I'm sure that who is it, Ari Emanuel or whoever's in charge of Endeavor, who bought both WWE and UFC,
yeah.
told him like, "Hey, Dana, you're not going to get another pass on that."
Yeah.
Because at this point too, and I'm stealing this. I heard it said, and I believe it. UFC doesn't need Dana anymore. Dana's there for
Oh,
ego. You know.
but he does a good he does a good job at make like I think like Dana and the fans are in this abusive relationship where the person no seriously like where the person like no he's a good man I need him sometimes he loses his temper and so he does sketchy shit but we need him um the guy has been brilliant at inserting the self-serving narrative of him being the savior of MMA of being and like the thing is that if you look at him when he started you see this somewhat camera shy person trying to play the role of a promoter and he's not too sure how to go about it like and then over time I don't think he was playing an act. I think it's sometimes like the fame the money like you get a bit of ego and it reveals something inside you so maybe he had this repressed side but I don't think it makes someone less insecure like because look at his initial footage right he's kind of like nothing kind of happy to just be in front of the camera which I don't blame him for it's exciting right but my point is that I think this guy really wanted to be that guy, and he was brilliant and certain narrative that he's required and he's needed. He's not. He's not. And at the end of the day, and again on my Bruno's MMA show channel, I don't do Bruno's MMA show anymore because I just couldn't keep up with the news, didn't have the kind of time. But I had guests over, and one of them was Mark Hunt, and Mark Hunt went on. You can only imagine went on a tirade against
Mhm.
Dana White, and like mentioned rightfully so that the fighters are the product, the fighters are. But then, even though I would like to agree with Mark, and I personally, on my personal level, agree with him on a grand scale of things, Francis Ngannou left the UFC and hasn't heard the UFC. Like that's a heavyweight champion of the world. There you go. They went in. Okay, John Jones against Bon Gamin. I'm remembering his nickname instead of his name right now. Bon Gamin.
Sure,
Cyril Gane.
sure.
Thank you. That's it. That's it. There you go. And the fans are talking shit. Like it's been like the fans are talking shit about Ngannou for not having told the company line, for not having stayed, for not like they're talking match. And time will tell if he does something good or not. Time will tell if he went too far in what he was asking for, or if he's rewarded with it. We don't know yet, but people are already taking like the side of the UFC of Dana White, and it's just like there's power to someone just acting like he's talking straightforward, like, look, I say it as it is, right? And a lot of rude people say that. A lot of rude people like live under the pretense of I'm just honest, I just say it as it is, and they get to say whatever shit they want to say. But I think that's convincing to people. If you go and you go like, well, you know what, this is who I am, and some people are gonna get offended, but other people are gonna be like, he says it like it is. And I think that's the image that Dana White has. That he's the guy, you might not like him, but he says things, but then he's always lying. If you pay attention, he's always lying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So I remember that Dana White, that demure, like junior executive with hair still hanging on, like, oh, well,
hanging on by a thread. Yeah.
yeah,
Just let it go,
yeah,
dude. Just
this forward, and then so when did he become this screaming lunatic? Now, obviously, he had it inside of him the whole time, Bruno. I get it, but the other part of it is he was over the top. He had one tirade on the original Ultimate Fighter. It was when Bobby Southworth was acting like such a jerk that Dana finally had it. Like, any man, and Dana was an ex-amateur boxer, he went off. Said, Bobby, you're not going to talk to me like that. And that was like the good show they use. Now that Dana is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, he's just screaming lunatic all of the freaking time. He's bashing everybody in this. Look, at the end of the day, I understand Dana's point from this. Dana came up with the idea of, hey, let's buy the UFC. Dana had the billionaire friends, and Dana put it over the top. So what Dana is saying is, hey, I don't care. I'm the one who took the risk. I'm the one who created this platform. Fighters, you're going to fight for what you're going to fight for. And by the way, if you don't want to, there's always somebody else. And that's the interesting thing about fighting. I mean, listen, Don King did the same thing under a different structure. I mean, I don't know if you remember, I don't know how old you are, Bruno, but the 1980s heavyweights, there was a slew of fat, underachieving heavyweights. And why was that? Because Don King was making all the money, just like Dana White is doing right now. I think that the estimate is like the athletes get like 16% of revenue, which is just like
it's obscene.
paltry. Now,
It is
Dana's
obscene.
yeah, it's obscene. Now, Dana's a victim of his own success, right? Like but Dana also could have sold out when Endeavor bought it. Dana could have quit at any time, and he
No,
doesn't want
he's
to.
hooked.
Why?
He's
Because
hooked. That's his drug. That's being.
oh, absolutely. So there's a triumvirate in life. I didn't really put this in any of my books, but it's what? It's sex, power, and money, right? And when someone has all this money, they don't. And of course, sex obviously comes with that. Then power becomes the crave, right? And Dana craves the limelight, the adulation. I'm Dana White. I'm this. Quite frankly, I like to think that I would have ridden off into the sunset, taking my $500 million, and I'd probably be somewhere in Europe right now enjoying the rest of my life. But listen, I know power is intoxicating. And if that did happen to me, would I think like Dana thinks, well, this is because I'm just so smart. This is why this happened. Rather than there was a bunch of circumstantial things and I got really, really lucky. And that's the pains of success. We're not able to see how close we were to failure. Or maybe that's why Dana is so stingy with his fighters. Hey guys, screw you. I almost went under with this. I'm not giving you any more money. And if you don't want to do it, someone else will do it.
I think there was an aspect of he wanted to be a fighter and never panned out. He realized didn't have it in him. And I don't know this. This is my own personal theory. I think part of him is jealous of fighters, insecure when it comes to fighters. I think this is I don't know this for a fact. I can't be like the glimmer in his eyes tells me that. It's just my own personal theory. I think that he gets something back by establishing himself over them and having them at his beck and call and having them so starved and in this bad relationship, that they'll defend him if, oh no, he treats us well, and I think that he wanted to be that guy. That's who he wanted to be, right? But also, I think what has revealed a lot to me about who he is the slap fighting that came up recently. Because I used to think, and this is where it puts into different perspective his whole passion for MMA, right? Because I did believe that he was passionate about MMA. I think he is, but at the same time, I think like the big aspect was also we can't control the pay in boxing, we can't control the fighters in boxing. Let's start this new sport where we'll control the fighters, we'll control the pay, we'll control all this, the belts, and so now that I see him like defend slap, like the slap fighting bullshit, it puts everything into context. That guy has just like he just doesn't give a fuck. Like I'm sure he knows how fucking stupid slap fighting is, but he just like will tell the camera that it's more popular than all the sports combined right now on social media. But that also puts into perspective what's his opinion of MMA really. I mean, I do think he's a fan. I do think, but in the beginning, was he looking at it the same way he's looking at slap fighting? Oh, look, here's a chance to make some money off people ready to put their brains in there. Like this, get CTE for me. And yeah, I don't like this whole slap fighting thing has put this whole person into perspective. And now you're getting older fighters into that. It seems again like very fucking obscene. And like I in my old channel, Bruno's MMA show, I interviewed man, I'm so tired right now. The heavyweight champion who broke his arm, Tim Sylvia, and now he's in slap fighting. He's the champion there now. They brought him back. Like the guy is medically unsound to fight MMA, but he can stand there to get hit. And they wouldn't pay for his arm, but they'll pay him to go do that. And all of that tells me a lot about, at least informs, I mean, my opinions. There you go. I'll be fair. Informs my opinions of Dan White. And I think at the end of the day, he is still that guy who was like all like excited to be in front of a camera, who wanted to be one of the fighters but couldn't.
So, Bruno, let me counter with something because Dana
Okay.
and I have this in common. So Dana, if you remember, and this was when they were just getting started. They had the first tough season. It went really well. Maybe they had the second. And what they did, and it was a brilliant move, Dana was training to have an unsanctioned bout with Tito Ortiz. About that, Tito didn't show up for. And Dana's talked about it, and I wholly believe it, and I'll tell you why I believe it. Dana was a better boxer than Tito Ortiz was. And by the way, Tito's a wrestler, and he's a ground and pound guy. That's great. And so when I went to the scrap pack as an ex-pro kickboxer, my stand-up was way above theirs. And it's funny, those are the same guys. So we avoided you because you suck, which, makes me smile. I think that MMA has so many facets. You can quench your ego with it in other ways. I think really what's happening with Dana is now that he's really in the big leagues, right? Like Ari Emanuel owns him, right, with Endeavor and the WWE. So now he wants his own project. And he's almost like P.T. Barnum out there selling it. Oh, it's the most popular sport. It's absurd. That whole thing is absolutely absurd. But remember what Dana did when Fertitas and him first bought UFC. They hired away Mark Ratner from the Nevada State Athletic Commission, their first move. And they put him to work on getting MMA legalized in Nevada because they knew without it, they couldn't go anywhere. And it happened, and Ratner's still with them, and hooray, hurrah. So now it's almost like, well, I changed the reality for the government once. Now I change the reality for the government again because slap fighting should not be legal by any commission. It is the most absurd, stupid thing in the world, but it's almost like Dana being P.T. Barnum up there and changing reality. I mean, the fact that he got it sanctioned speaks to how much money Dana has rather than anything logical. And then the sport stinks, and we can all pray it's gone. But maybe what Dana wants to do is, this is my thing. It's the now he feels like an employee to Endeavor. What he really wants is, no, I'm the big man again. I'm going to make another $100 million company and prove to you guys it's because I'm special, that you guys are all lazy idiots, and it's me, Dana White. Not that I got lucky,
Yeah, although of all the things he could have done, it just seems like so dumb.
It's stupid
I
beyond
don't
belief.
I don't get it. Like, and what's funny is that Thriller, like who had a Jake Paul versus Ben Askren fight, they're the first ones who kind of mixed it up because they had like some show in between the fights, the boxing fights where they did slap fights, and I think Ric Flair was there. Um, so it's not they just kind of took it. It was muck. They just took it from. It's such a weird source of inspiration as well, if that's where he took it from, which I think he did. I don't know if other things. There's I think there's a company. I think it's in John Nutt. I don't know if it's a nickname or his actual name. He has like this thing called Fight Circus. I think they're established in Thailand. They do like they come up with like stupid fights, man, like a musical chair Muay Thai, like 2 against 1, but the one is a bigger guy, or uh, like dude versus transgender fighter. Like they just do like whatever kind of fights, and it still seems like less. It still seems more of a sport than slap fighting, musical chair Muay Thai or whatever. It's I but I think you're right. But in a way,
Bruno,
yeah.
there's a certain amount of lunacy that comes with all those hundreds of millions of dollars. You lose a certain amount of sanity. And I think slap fight is proof of that. And by the way, I don't care how big it gets; it's still stupid.
Oh, it will. Look, when Bare Knuckle came on, I wasn't one of those like, oh, it's too much, because to me it's like, yeah, it's bloody, but trust me, it's someone's gonna live way better in their old age than if they did regular boxing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so people are like, oh my God, so much blood, it's barbaric. Like, no, 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 no. And Masvidal is doing now the bare knuckle MMA. He has his game bred. Again, I think that is much more humane than fighting with gloves. Like,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I mean, a lot of people don't understand it or aren't involved, but all gloves do at the best is
they're a
protect
weapon.
the hand of the guy wearing them. And all they do is it's all bad all around.
Well, your
And
thumb story, right?
yeah, there you
Yeah, you
go.
can
And that's
swing willy
bad
nilly.
technique. No,
Yeah.
I agree with you. And by the way, bare knuckle has history, right? The Marquis of Queensberry is the one who put those gloves on. I'm sure he thought he was doing a good thing, but bare knuckle has a vaunted history. And by the way, so a funny story, Bruno, I got to tell you because of this. So I moved from San Francisco. I was with the Scrap Pack to San Diego right before I got busted. I was there about 3 years before I got busted again, but I had lived there for 20 years before. In any event, Joey Beltran was finishing his MMA career at Bellator, and I used to spar with him pretty regularly. And quite frankly, I was better than Beltran. I mean, I've been in martial arts my whole life, and then I go to jail, and Beltran becomes BKFC heavyweight champion of the world. So I get out of prison, and I start making as much noise as I can. I'm like Feldman, Beltran, what's up? Take out the Gambino Associate. I thought it would be a fun promotion for him, but they weren't having it one way or the other. Either way, I mean, Joey's a good guy. He's not like those scrap pack guys. He doesn't say anything that didn't actually happen. I mean, Joey respected me as a fighter. He said it. So yeah, but I love what Feldman's done. Now Feldman doesn't like me because I badgered him so much for the Joey fight. But yeah, I mean, man, look, he had an article that came out not that long ago. He was right about ready to commit suicide, dead broke, daughter, wife. And he said, I'm not a quitter. I'm not doing it. And then he formed BKFC, and look at where he is in such a short time, man.
No way, I
So
didn't know.
I love it.
My initial impression of him was pretty negative because of that time when he said like, we put fights to entertain, we're gonna take the purse away from fighters, and when he made that speech, that left a bad impression on me. But I don't know, given some context of he was in a bad place and all that, like maybe he was playing the role he thought he had to play. Like people change, and um, but I do think that BKFC, they're doing interesting stuff. I think I'm
Well,
really mean it. Yeah.
can I be honest with you? The product sucks. I don't really like watching the fights,
Okay.
but the idea that like it has history, and he's gotten it sanctioned and he's doing it. What I don't really understand, Bruno, is the return on investment. I mean, he's got all these ex-UFC guys. He's obviously paying them a lot of money. There is no way his subscription service is carrying that. So, it leads me in my old world to think like, he's from Philly. Is it the Philadelphia mob financing this BKFC thing? It just makes me wonder.
You don't think he has enough sponsors?
Come on, man. I mean, he puts on shows all the time. But granted, shows don't cost that much. And even streaming doesn't cost that much anymore. But yeah, I mean, and I get that. And I love the brilliance of the idea. It's like, we're going to be the Netflix of fighting, subscription, $5 a month, and you have all our fights rather than the pay-per-view model, which quite honestly, I don't even get to watch all the fights now because it's too expensive.
Dude, yeah, so in Spain they have Eurosport, and you have a subscription. It's like $5 per month. You can watch all the UFC pay-per-views. On a completely unrelated note, but of course you need, however, you need like a European credit card.
Right.
Yeah. On an unrelated note, I have family in Spain. On another unrelated note, I use Surfshark, which allows me to change my geographical location when I use the internet. I don't know if Eurosport. Do you have family in Greece, Derek?
Listen, we'll take that offline.
I don't know. I don't know if Eurosport. No, we're talking about different matters. I'm all over the place. I'm talking about different things. I don't know if Eurosport has UFC in Greece. You might want to look into it.
I will do that.
Yeah, Surfshark is the VPN. There's other ones. There's ExpressVPN, Surfshark. You can just change the country where you're watching from. So.
Yeah, I mean, I like my Brazilian jiu-jitsu coaches. They watch it from Brazil, and in Brazil, it's all free, right? So
really?
yeah,
Wow, it's free. There you go.
and by
Even
the way, in Mexico, the boxing is free, right? Because there's such popular sports in those countries.
Yeah, man. Like and now Mexicans are, I think, in the next 10 years. Yeah, I mean, we're okay. I don't want to. Okay, we should probably end this soon. But real quick, I want to say I think like in the next 10 years, MMA is gonna really blow up in Mexico. I really think it's. Yeah.
Bruno, so funny story. So I got married and I moved to Utah. But when I was in prison the last time, I was learning Spanish. What was my intent? I was moving to Tijuana, and I was going to train the first Mexican champion of the world. Now, plans changed. I went to Utah, but the champion of the world came shortly after I got out, Brandon Moreno. So, yeah, you and I are on the same level, man. I knew it.
Yeah, no, seriously, they have cardio for days. They're fast. I'm generalizing, but right.
Fight culture.
Yeah. Oh my God! Like they're raised for that stuff.
Boxing is the biggest sport in the country. It's not football. And then right now MMA is catching up.
I think it'll surpass it eventually. I think it sounds like blasphemy to say so, but I think the Mexican mindset will just like the pragmatism of MMA too much, and it's real life application, if I may say so.
Yep.
I hope it's okay to say that. I think it's gonna. Boxing will never go away. They have too many heroes. It's too much part of their culture. But I think MMA is gonna, at the very least, like be head, shoulder to shoulder with boxing before long.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And Moreno's kind of like not the typical Mexican fighter either, which is funny. I guess
He's pretty scrappy, man. He's pretty scrappy.
Oh, but I mean in his personality.
Oh yeah.
With the Legos and everything, it's like, oh my God, it looks like a guy that could have been at a hobby store where I went to. But yeah.
That's like a cute kid.
Yeah. What was it? The baby assassin? Is that...
Yeah.
Okay, Derek. At some point we have to end this. I think the moment has come. But seriously, you're welcome back. I'd really like to have you over again another time. Yeah, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so if you guys are into the crime stuff, read my book on Amazon, Greed and Fear: The Galanis Crime Family. or go to TikTok at Derek Meyer Galanis. It depends what you like. If you like the videos, go to the TikTok. For the fight stuff, Warrior of the Light, A Fighter's Journey Through the Rise of Mixed Martial Arts can be had on Amazon. You can buy it with Greed and Fear for cheaper. And then my TikTok is at Derek Galanis. I talk about boxing. I talk about MMA, kickboxing, everything fight related, martial arts.
I do want to ask you very quick question. Like, would you, like you've been talking about BKFC, that was a few years back now. Would you still consider like doing some pro fighting?
So let me, yeah, it's a loaded question. So
Sorry.
at 45 years old, I was beating up Joey Beltran in the ring. And by the way, part of that was I know he was sucking down to 205. You know, going to BKFC, went to heavyweight. So I keep that in mind. But I was a bad man. I was dangerous. I will tell you that 5 years at this age is a huge difference. And it's just been really humbling. And now all I really train, unless I'm training myself in my gym, is jujitsu. And let me say something else. And by the way, I'm bad at jujitsu, Bruno, like I said.
Me
And
too.
let me say something else too. At my age, nobody wants me around in a striking gym. Why? Because very likely I'll beat you up. And that makes you look really bad. We talked about the egos. Now, let's say you beat me up. Does that make you look tough? No. You beat up a 50-year-old man. So the answer to that, Bruno, I can say unequivocally is no. Now, listen, if one of the guys from the scrap pack or any of them, you know, want to call me out and say, yeah, I will do this or that, yeah, I would be happy to do something like that if it's for money. But, you know, and that's the thing with Joey. When the Joey thing came up, they said to me, go to tryouts, have a fight. And I said to them, I've been doing this my whole life, man. I'm not going to tryouts. I used to beat Joey up in the gym. Ask Joey. So, yeah, man, there's not going to be any ramp up. But if someone offered me a fight, yeah, I'd take it.
What are the tryouts? People just like bare knuckle on the spot and they watch them? Are those the tryouts?
Bare Knuckle was doing like an open tryout. Now they don't do it anymore because they've gotten big enough. But they were going around from state to state, and they were like inviting people to try out for bare knuckle. And you know, a lot of people got in that way. Now they've got so much traction, they don't need that anymore.
Yeah, at the tryouts, I guess I'd be afraid of like because of the cuts and all that, like diseases or something. Because at least in when you go to a pro fight, they've been tested, medically proven.
I don't think they sparred during tryouts.
Oh, okay. I thought they outright had like a bare knuckle match or something for maybe one round or something. Okay. No, okay. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, once again, thank you very much for coming to the show. Let's do it again sometime. Thank you for your time. And thank everyone. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Anytime, Bruno.